Talking about city plans, are all cities planned, or do they just randomly develop?
You know, it's funny when you look at the history of, for example, East Palo Alto or the 101 municipalities that make up the Bay Area, and each city has somewhat of a vision. And so how we as a city approach getting to that vision is why we need a plan. There is, I think, for most of the cities, there's a very strong desire to ensure that the quality of life, the particular aspects that preserve that quality, can be prepared or created in the long term. And so through planning, we'll reach out to the community and ask them what are those aspects in their environment that they would like to see.
Now, that seems to happen, I would think, what you're saying, after cities are developed. When I think of cities, I sometimes think perhaps of a few houses that got developed, a main street, a general store, and that's how the city started. So,
each city has a different history, and it's the history of the city that really and how it has evolved over time that has really created what we see today in the city. So it's true, many cities started as railroad towns. They started around the railroad. There'll be some commerce and people living around there. And as the area grows, as economic development happens and people move in, the city will expand. And so you see that history evolve over time. Buildings come down, new buildings go up, streets generally actually stay where they were when they were first planned.
And is that kind of maybe random? You know, if you're planning around the railroad track or planning around the waterway?
It's yes and no. It's random. Cities aren't necessarily master planned. So it's not that there is necessarily, for most cities, one vision that is created, that is carried out over a very long period of time. Cities tend to be organic. They tend to change. They tend to modify over time as best they can based on changes in population, changes in the economic situation, and you can see that all around this area here. You can see it in East Palo Alto. You can see it in all of the surrounding jurisdictions, how the city has started as one thing and sort of changed and evolved over time.
Yes, sir, Lee.
I was going to say, cities come, when he's talking about the population, cities come out of community. They come out of a community response. So you have, in this area, in California, the Bay Area, you have very old cities, like San Francisco. Very old city, came out of response of people coming to mine and coming to the hills and doing transactions, business transactions at one place, and that started San Francisco. Then you have other cities that came up as communities grew and became what they were, became agricultural communities or industrial communities or shipyard communities, whatever. The communities formed around, and then they needed services that became services enough to become a city.
And I'd also add that one of the actually sort of earth-shattering books for persons moving to this region was called 2 Years Before the Mast. It talks about California before the actual gold rush. And before 1849, there was virtually no population here. But now we represent, 8% of the U.S. population, the state of California. Some 30-some-odd million people. And in the Bay Area alone, there are some 7 or 8 million people that we have to plan for. And the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR as we call it, has provided a tool for planners to help us.
Now, before you get into that, at what point, if cities just kind of developed, at what point does a city planner, does the city hire a city planner or anybody to begin to lay out the city? And why is that necessary?
Okay, so you could have a city. I mean, you could have a place, right? Most cities come out of a place, come out of a community, come out of a place. So you might have it planned, like, well, East Palo Alto came out of a place. It was a county place before it became a city, and at some point, then the community said, we want to be a city. So in California, you have very old cities and you have very young cities, like East Palo Alto, Dublin, American Canyon are all young cities, but they're places that have been in existence with community and transactions for a long time.
And I think that's really important to note. For example, the city of East Palo Alto is in San Mateo County. It is the last incorporated city in the county. There are, I believe, 21 municipalities. One of them is the county itself. So the county, up until the city's incorporation, did all of the planning. And there was a concern, I think, from the perspective of the residents of the city of East Palo Alto. We have persons that actually don't live here and that are doing the planning for us. And for East Palo Altans, it seemed to imply that they didn't have local control. So from the standpoint of exerting local control, the ability to say that we don't want to have the county dump in our jurisdictional boundaries before there was a jurisdiction. So you would say in our area of the county. We don't want to have a chemical processing plant. We don't want to have certain types of uses that seem incompatible with residential development.
So, Matt, at what point are you called on as a city planner? Are you called on because people say these are things we don't want and therefore we'd like to have this, and the city gets a city planner, or somebody in the city administration decides, let's get a city planner. So how does a city planner come into the picture?
So first, there are different kinds of planners. So Brent, who works for the city, is a city planner, and he has certain responsibilities in the city. I'm a consultant, and I'm also a planner, and I get hired by different municipalities when they need a certain type of expertise. And so my expertise is helping to create long-range plans for communities, and to do that working hand in hand with the community. And that's why I work with someone like Serlene, who's great at getting the community out and involved in the process.
So is it a city council, a function of the city council to sit down and decide we need to have a planning process?
I think that it really, you have to almost back up a little to think of the state. The state being the prime protector of public safety and welfare. The state ceded their powers to municipalities, counties, and cities. And they said that, for example, if you're a city, you will have the power, the police power, to determine how the orderly development should occur within your jurisdictional boundaries, minding the spheres of influence for the surrounding areas. So I mention that because, I mean, as Matt indicated, he works not only for cities, he'll work for a county as well. So he'll cross many different jurisdictional boundaries. But as a city planner, what I'm looking at is what can we do to ensure that all the different components that are important to a community can coexist, and coexist in a way that is not at odds. For example, we do want to have businesses in our city. In fact, business growth is one of the main indicators of housing growth. If you have lots of jobs, the demand and need for housing will follow. So as a city planner, what we try to do is to ensure that the planning does occur in a fashion that's compatible with the needs of the local population.
Sir,